Hey, welcome back to the Old Gravy Podcast. It's a hot summer, July here in New Jersey, back up from Florida. I got a good guest coming up for you today on today's podcast. It's Cynical Publius. If you look to my right, if you're watching this on YouTube, I want you to see his logo on X. That way you'll know where to find him. It's Cynical Publius. And it's a great follow, and he's got a ton of followers. And I've had him on the radio show, and just for the listeners of the podcast, I've been doing fill-in radio hosting over in Philadelphia at 1210 WPHT. That's out of Philadelphia. You can find it on the Odyssey app. You can find it on iHeartRadio. But I've been on there frequently, and I've had Cynical Publius on, I think 2 times already, and we've had some really good segments. What I like about doing the podcast is I'm going to really get to spend some time with him, and he is a former active colonel in the U.S. Army, and I'm going to let him kind of give you his background. He keeps his identity. He doesn't provide that here or on his X file, but he'll give you some background because he's got a very interesting background. We're going to dig into that today. And he is, let me give you a description. So this is, online, well, obviously, he's a free thinker. There's no doubt about that. He says that right in his profile, but he's been branded by Democrats as an intellectual terrorist. Now, I personally would take that as a compliment. If someone was saying that about me, that means what he says and what he posts and what he writes, they don't want to hear it because it's probably very cutting and it's probably right on. So I love that description that you will see if you go on X and you look him up, start following him, and even give him that check mark where you can follow him continuously. So you know when he posts something, there's a little checkbox you can do there. So every time he makes a post, you can see what he's saying because it's really good. And that's why I've had him on the show, and that's why I have him on the podcast. But before I bring him on, I got to talk about today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is Plaza Grande. Have you been dreaming of a maintenance-free country club lifestyle in a stunning residence? Look no further than the Plaza Grande in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. That's right near the old racetrack for people in the area. Imagine living in a place where you can enjoy luxury community amenities and where everything is just minutes away. Restaurants, retail shopping, grocery stores, it's all at your fingertips. And that's not all. Dive into pristine swimming pools. Not a pool, swimming pools. There's more than one. You can take a stroll to the nearby stores. Tons of activities, pools, movies, mahjong, bingo, you name it. They have it at Plaza Grande. Get 1 month free on an 18-month lease or 2 months free on a 24-month lease. For more information, head to PlazaGrandeCherryHill.com. Spell that out. It's PlazaGrandeCherryHill.com. So, as I was saying before, my guest, and I'm going to refer to him as Colonel, just it's easier than saying Cynical Publius, but you'll need that to get to his to follow him on X. So you can also follow me on X too at Old Gravy Podcast. But he's a fantastic guest, and I now have him on a podcast, and we have no more commercial breaks. So Cynical Publius, Colonel, I want to welcome you to the Old Gravy Podcast.
Hey, Tom, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I really enjoyed the radio bits we did. I'm glad we're going to have a chance to talk at a little more length. Want me to introduce myself?
Yeah, you know what? Give a little bit of background because I think that's important to kind of some of the discussions we're going to have.
Yeah, so I'm a retired United States Army colonel, was a logistics officer, and served in Iraq and Afghanistan, served in Kuwait right after that first war. Served all over the world and the country, actually. Spent a lot of time in the 82nd Airborne Division, and really enjoyed my service. It was great, made me who I am. I mean, certainly there were a lot of bad things I saw, but I wouldn't be who I am if I hadn't served in the United States Army as an officer, and I'm very proud of that. And then I got to the point where I was in my early 40s. It was kind of time to retire. I was getting the signals, the brigades that I wanted to command. The Army was cutting them. And I decided to go in a completely different direction and went to law school. I'm not exactly sure what I was thinking.
Let me ask you a question on that. So you went to law school after retiring. So you were in your 40s when you took that path.
Yeah, I did. I don't want to identify the law school I went to, but it's one of the really good ones. And I was a 44-year-old man with a bunch of 23-year-old recent Harvard grads. It was definitely an interesting experience. I enjoyed it. It was great.
That's very interesting. Very interesting.
After having come from having an enormous budget in the Pentagon and commanding soldiers in war, just being able to be responsible for myself and learn cool stuff was like a big vacation. So I did that because I'd always had this sort of burning desire to be a lawyer. I always thought it would be intellectually challenging, and my wife was very supportive of it, which was key. And I rapidly learned that I hated litigators and I didn't want anything to do with litigation.
Right.
So I started looking at working in corporate law, and I got some great offers from some folks out in Silicon Valley to do sort of startup venture capital work. And I thought, hey, this is a great opportunity for me to combine my leadership management skills, my new legal skills. And so that's what I've been doing for, like 15 years now. And the reason why I'm anonymous is I'm a partner in a law firm that works in Silicon Valley. It's a very liberal place, and I have some very conservative views. And I feel that I owe it to my partners to try and keep my identity on the down low as much as I can. I don't want to bring bad publicity or any kind of publicity really to myself or my firm. So I do this pseudonymously. You know what word I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And I started this X account back when it was Twitter back in 2016 because I was just so annoyed with what I was seeing in the media about Donald Trump, and I just wanted to vent. And I got squashed. I mean, I was suspended constantly. I was eventually got permanently suspended. Couldn't get any followers.
Right.
And then when Elon bought X, he set the account free. And I just started doing the same thing, and it just took off. It's certainly not something I planned on. I just write what I think, and it's actually opened up a lot of doors for me. I've been getting published under this name, Cynical Publius, in Tablet Magazine, The Federalist, American Greatness Magazine. I've had the agents coming to me looking to help me with a book. I actually am working on a book at the moment. So it's this whole sort of vista of opportunity that I never, ever imagined, including being on the radio and on a podcast with you right now.
No, and I want to let the listeners know, if you listen to you have like 230,000 listeners, and you've talked about the monetization of what goes on there. So I'm going to cover a little bit of that as we dig into the podcast. And I talked to you about this before, compared to the radio is like current events. It's what's going on today. What are these, it's kind of quick cuts of current events. Now with the podcast, we're able to go into some more deeper stuff that is not all like present day news driven. But unfortunately, I have to we're going to start the show. I'm actually going against my philosophy, but I've seen some posts that you've made about the Epstein episode, and I don't think it's going away. So I think there's some shelf life to this. And I also think there's some philosophical stuff that we'll discuss, even when this Epstein thing all goes away, because it is creating a lot of different things, not just politically, but on a larger scale. And that's why I want to open up with the Epstein. Just your overall, and then I'm going to ask you we'll dig in a little bit deeper, but I just want to know your thoughts on what I call the Epstein and the Trump MAGA dilemma. And I actually think I call Epstein MAGA, and Epstein MAGA there is a contingent that they are not letting it go. It's got like that feeling of a little bit of a revolt inside the MAGA movement. So what's your 50,000-foot flyover, and then maybe we'll drive down a little bit.
Okay, so let me preface this by saying sort of two overarching thoughts that underpin everything that I said over and under. It covers everything that I think. Two ideas. One is that Bondi absolutely screwed this up with the rollout. The fact that she was even willing to say there was such a thing as a list, or was whatever word she said, where she confirmed that there was data that would be released. And then the whole ex-influencer, here's some binders stuff was an absolute PR disaster.
Yeah, absolutely.
I defend none of that. And the other sort of overarching viewpoint I have that I've come to realize is me, you, everybody else on the conservative side has had a lot of fun for like at least 5 or 6 years with the Epstein didn't kill himself jokes and the memes and Epstein Island. And the fact of the matter is what did you or I actually know? I knew that Epstein was a shady character. I knew he was engaged with underage girls committing crimes. And I knew that it was making the Democrats uncomfortable. So I played along with those memes and those jokes, but I never thought I actually knew anything. I always thought of it as kind of a Saul Alinsky style, let's insult the enemy type thing.
Yeah.
But a lot of people grabbed onto that like we had facts.
Yeah.
And we don't have facts. The facts that we actually have are still very limited.
Yeah.
What's actually happened with Maxwell and Epstein in their trials were limited to the matters of 3 underage girls that those two victimized. And so this idea that there's this wealth of information that reveals this vast cabal of international influencers and leaders all engaged in this sort of pedophile underground, that might be true. I'm not saying it's untrue, but we don't know that it's true. Right. No one does.
Yeah.
And to me, fact matters. Assumptions are not facts. Rumors are not facts. And when it's your side, when you're demolishing your side, you damn well better speak factually. Because I look at Pam Bondi and everybody's saying, oh, we got to fire Blondie. She has led the DOJ in the most breathtaking success that I have seen in the courts for the conservative movement, the MAGA movement, whatever you want to call it, in my lifetime. It has been breathtaking to watch what they've achieved. Not only have they achieved win after win in the courts, but they've done it in such a way that the Democrats and the rogue judges have discredited themselves. They let them walk into an ambush, and they executed it perfectly. I am just completely enamored with the amazing success that Bondi and Trump have had out of the DOJ, and I'm unwilling to throw that away and destroy it because she screwed up a PR thing. It just doesn't make sense to me. People aren't seeing the forest for the trees, in my opinion.
And I'm going to add to that, General. I think in the sense like where I never knew, and the Epstein jokes were good. Yeah, he hung himself, but I always thought he did hang himself because it's not that hard to hang yourself. And that federal prison in New York City is a hellhole. People who work there don't even like working there. Do they really care about their jobs? No. And that's just from me talking to people that have worked inside the federal prison system. But here was see what happened too, though. I think with certain segments of MAGA, is that Epstein led to something they wanted. Like one thing was that the elites, and there's always a get even with the elites, like the most powerful Hollywood people, political people, financial people. Okay, we got them now for for committing a crime with young women, and it's on video. So they get so invested in that. The next thing, there is a part of MAGA that wants to see America to cut down the influence that they think Israel has on the United States and AIPAC, and they were kind of think, well, Epstein's going to lead that thing that we want to take down and end, that Israel thing. That is part of MAGA. That's a fact. And, they could, on some issues, they could be right. But I think people got emotionally invested that Epstein would take down the Mossad and expose everything we don't need to be doing in the Middle East. And once people get emotional, it's hard to pull them off because this thing's been going on, since 2019?
Yeah, but you know who gets emotional over being fact-based? Purple-haired 23-year-old Democrat women with nose rings. Yeah, that's who gets emotional over facts.
Yeah, absolutely.
It breaks my heart to see that same sort of emotion over logic idea permeating the MAGA movement. And I get what you said, Tom. I don't disagree with anything that you said, but it's important that we operate on facts.
Yeah.
Was Epstein a Mossad agent? Well, gosh, there's some suspicious things that suggest that he might have been, but
right.
We don't know that. You don't know that as a fact. And if you're going to tear down everything we've been working for since 2016, you damn well better be sure you know what you're doing. That's my beef, is the people who are willing to just go into this whole diatribe about stuff that they heard, that they think is true, they don't know is true, and destroy the whole agenda in the process. It just, oh, and by the way, if you say what I'm saying right now, you will literally have hundreds of people accuse you of being a pedophile or a pedophile apologist, which sort of gives you an indication as to the actual emotional, driven intellectual bankruptcy of this whole argument.
And add to that, I mean, and believe me, MAGA has been through a lot with Donald Trump, and they've hung in there. And when Trump got frustrated in that one post, like, you know what, I'm done with you guys. I don't care if you're with me or against me. A very emotional response, but that also tells me something. Maybe Trump's the king now. He's in charge. He sees what they have and what they don't have. And all the people that do believe in him, why do we actually think he's lying to us? Some people say, oh, he's being Machiavellian. He's now going to wait and then attack. I don't buy any of that. Then again, I'm probably the worst person to talk to because I was never big on Epstein having all these powerful people and he blackmailed them. First of all, I don't think it's that easy to blackmail people. And I don't think real powerful rich people, if they're deviants, they don't go to get deviant with another powerful guy because they understand how that powerful world works. They might do their dirty deeds with some lowlife who they can control. But to do it, they don't need to fly down to Epstein Island and do something sexual with women, illegal. Like, they're powerful people. I was just never buying the blackmail thing. Just never. I don't think it's that easy to blackmail people. I really don't.
I agree, Tom. And I'm not going to discount the possibility that there really was this cabal of wealthy people who were stupid enough to wander into a blackmail den like that.
Yeah.
But I'm a lawyer, and I'm an Army officer too. One of the things I posted about the other day is that the Army does this thing called the military decision-making process, where you figure out what course of action to take.
Yeah.
And the very first thing that you do is you identify your facts, and then where the facts leave holes, you identify assumptions. You really work hard to prove that your assumptions are valid, because if you assume that the enemy's not behind that hill, and they are, y'all die. So, I mean, I'm very, very attuned to the idea of what do we know as a matter of fact and what are we assuming? And as far as this blackmail thing goes, we know zero as a matter of fact. We have suspicions, we have thoughts. So I think your theory is perfectly valid. But again, if we're going to undermine this movement, we need to do it based on reality. And to go to Trump sort of dissing his followers, first of all, I don't think acts as a fair representation of American voters. It's people who are passionate about politics.
Yeah.
And then even within that group, the folks who are losing their minds over this are a relatively small group. So Trump may have the numbers and said, the fact that there's some people on X yelling at me is irrelevant. But the man is a human being too, right?
Yeah.
He took a bullet for us.
Yep.
He took like multiple attempts to put him in prison for us. And he didn't need to do any of this. The guy's a billionaire. He has his television show. He's got his golden tower in Manhattan. He doesn't need to do any of this. And every time that we doubted him, he's come through. Trump's a human being. I mean, he's taken a bullet for us. He's nearly gone to jail on these trumped-up cases. He didn't need to do what he's doing. He's a billionaire. He could have stayed on his television shows, his golden tower in Manhattan, and he didn't. He did all this for us. And he can't tell us everything that's happening. And every time that we doubt the man, we learn later that he had things under control in the background. The bombing of the nuclear sites in Iran is a perfect example. And I think he's just a human being who got fed up. There's this saying of let the man cook. Well, let him cook. And people aren't letting him do that. And I think his frustration just got the better of him, because I think in his mind, he's saying, what more do I need to do for you, ingrate? Yeah. And it spilled over. Not a good thing for a politician to do, but it happened.
And, I'll say this too. And I don't want anyone sending an email to the oldgravypodcast@gmail.com telling me I don't know I'm not saying there's no one that's going to caught up. Allegedly, David Copperfield, the musician, kind of had a freaky thing going on with Epstein. Then you have the Prince. But that's about all I saw. So there could be something, but it still might be very disappointing. I thought Alan Dershowitz, I thought this was interesting when he was on Piers Morgan. And I don't know if you saw it, but I'll explain it to the listeners, then I'll have you comment. He started off saying that, that Piers Morgan said to him, well, if you can't, because the two judges in New York, Dershowitz couldn't talk about it. So Piers Morgan says to him, he goes, well, you could tell us how many are on the list because he's claiming he saw the list. And Dershowitz, who actually got massages allegedly in New York, I think he admitted to the massages. And I don't know if it was on the island. It might have been in Palm Beach. But the bottom line, his wife was there with him. And I don't believe anything went on. But that's the other thing about how many people could get caught up in this. But then Piers Morgan says, well, you saw the list. How many? Just give us a rough number. And he goes 5. Then he goes, well, several. And several means 3 to 5. So he started walking it back. And then Dershowitz said, he walked it back to several, to 3 or 5, and then says it's not really a list that Epstein wrote. He didn't have a list of people he was going to blackmail. It was a list that investigators named, that they received information and they put names down. But Dershowitz is saying he saw this, whatever these judges had, and it was 3 to 5. So once again, people out there that want more of the Epstein thing, it might be a lot smaller than you were hoping for. So it's not going to bring down the Mossad or the Israel relationship or get people that you've been mad at because they've been in your face about being a Trumper and they run a bank or they're Hollywood celebrities or whatever. I don't think it's getting there. You might get something, but I'm one of those guys saying you're not going to get a lot. But but there's something you said. Well, on your
can I comment on
sure.
that? On that, though? Can you hold that thought?
Sure.
But 3 to 5 of what? I think everybody thinks this is this comet ping pong thing where 8-year-old children are being tied up in a basement. Well, 3 to 5 people who had sex with an 18-year-old woman who was consenting to it. Now, if that's some 55-year-old banker, that's kind of distasteful. That age difference bothers people, but it's not illegal. So, I mean, we don't know what those 3 to 5 people did. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's another whole thing. Like people do kind of things that you don't like in the culture, but that's just the way it is because we live in a constitutional republic, and as long as you're within the law, nothing can happen to you. It might be distasteful, as you said, but there was another thing you posted on X, which I found interesting, and I didn't really know. And you were very transparent about the social media revenue model, like specifically on. You talked about Twitter because that's where you conduct a lot of your posts, but it goes across the board on a lot of these social platforms. And I'll just say it that a lot of the people that live in the revenue model of being influencers on social media, they need a lot of red meat and they needed a lot of time to keep those numbers up because it's not like you get paid a consistent amount. You're getting paid in real time for the hits you're getting. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. I was trying to be very transparent with people because I think a lot of folks on X try and keep this secret. So X has this thing called the Creator Revenue Sharing Program. Look, if I didn't make a penny, I'd be on X because it's a hobby for me. I enjoy getting my voice heard and being able to influence things a little bit. But they've got this thing where you can get paid for the number of engagements you get by other paid users. And I signed up for it, and it's kind of surprising to me how much money it involves. I quoted in my post $2,200 to $6,000 a month.
Yep.
There was one month where I made $6,000 because the vice president retweeted me and Elon Musk retweeted me twice. Typically, it's closer to that $2,200 amount, which is not insignificant.
No.
I mean, that's a mortgage.
That's a mortgage payment. That's what I was thinking. I get it.
And all I'm doing is what I've been doing. But think about it this way. I have 230,000 followers. There's a lot of influencers who have 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, who are out there posting on this stuff all the time. And here's the real important fact. I can tell you that income that I get is directly tied to events happening that I am considered to be a smart voice on.
Okay.
So during the presidential campaign, I was nailing it. I mean, it was great, particularly when I spent some time talking about Tim Waltz and his service in the Minnesota National Guard, things that I know about.
Yep.
When things get slow, that money goes down. When Trump dropped the bombs on Iran, destroying their nuclear program, right away, big spike, because I had some things that were authoritative and meaningful to say that I actually know about. But my point being is that when the news cycle swings slow, there's no money to be made. And so I think a lot of these influencers who do this full time, which I do not, they end up wanting to create controversy for purposes of making money. If I'm making $2,000 with 230,000 subscribers, what do you think they're making with 3 million subscribers?
Yeah, it's big business.
And a lot of them actually have staff.
Yep.
So they have to make payroll. So it is in their interest to create controversy. And I'll tell you, it's a temptation. I have been tempted at times to just stoke controversy. And I've learned not to do that because I think it's sometimes I'll put out hypotheticals mostly just for laughs.
Yeah.
But I think it's unfair to lead people in directions where you're swaying their emotions on things you don't actually know about. And that's been my beef with what I've seen happening with this whole Epstein thing. People who have always been ostensibly MAGA influencers, quote unquote, have decided that this is a great opportunity to drum up engagement. And I'm convinced that that's what's happening, at least in some cases.
Well, I give you credit because I haven't seen, and I follow a lot of people on X who have big followings, and no one talks about, that it's a business. And like you said, they probably turn into small operations with researchers, bookkeepers, and they start having bills to pay because they are running they're running a company. And once you start running a company, you start getting costs, and that's what influencers are doing. But your post is the first time I saw that. The next, and I'm going to try to get through this Epstein thing. The next thing, Dan Bongino, you wrote like an ode to Dan Bongino, not Don. And I'm gonna read the ode because you put a poem. I don't know what it was, but I was like, "What's?"
No. You might be not getting the whole thing. I'll let you go ahead, and then I'll explain to you what was going on.
Yeah, because I really didn't get it, but that's. I'm glad I'm bringing it up, but I want to read it. Monday, this is what you wrote, and then everybody, the Colonel put a picture of Dan underneath this. It said, "Monday, hold your head. Tuesday, Wednesday, stay in bed. On Thursday, watch the wall instead. Friday, I'm in love." Where were you going with that?
That's a song by The Cure, okay, from the 80s.
Okay.
We're of a similar age. Okay, so I was really irritated last week, I think it was, when there were so many influencers who were saying, either Bongino or Bondi is going to be gone Monday. I have got definitive proof Bongino stepping away on Monday. I mean, it was just driving people crazy.
Right.
Particularly the folks who were big fans of Dan Bongino's podcast.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I have, sometimes my spidey sense starts tingling and I say, that sounds like BS to me. I don't believe that.
Yeah.
And I actually went in this whole other story of this guy on X back during the election. His name was the Black Insurrectionist, who was claiming that he had these 60 Minutes people telling him that Kamala got fed fake information, and he had a high school student of Tim Waltz saying he had sex with him.
I remember it.
And I just, this guy was fake. I could tell. His stuff he said about his military service was fake. And so I just started telling people, this is fake. This isn't true. And I got ripped. I mean, I probably lost like 1,000 followers, and it ended up being untrue. Well, I had the same exact feeling about Dan Bongino leaving this past Monday. Mm-hmm. And so when Monday didn't happen, I posted his picture and I posted the Mamas and Papas lyrics Monday.
Okay.
And then he still was there on
yeah.
And he was still there on Tuesday. So I posted his picture again on Tuesday with some lyrics from I forget what Tuesday song I did. Tuesday's Gone with the Wind, Leonard Skinner. It was another one.
Yeah, I missed out on that. I didn't get it, but now I get it.
And so today was Friday. So we got Friday lyrics. And now I'm done. I just wanted to prove the point that for all you people who said with certainty that he would be gone on Monday, he wasn't, and he isn't. It's Friday today.
Yeah, I will make one comment about it, and I think it shows. And listen, I like him. I'm glad he's part of the FBI, and I like that he doesn't come from that traditional background, but there in the sense that he was not just worked in the New York Police Department, but ran like a captain, ran a precinct, or that when he went to the Secret Service, he moved up and ran like large departments or organizations, and he had an executive experience. Because I actually think when he said he got upset and said, I'm not going, and I don't know if this is even true. I could be just listening to influencers. But if it is true that he got his nose out of joint and went so public, I'm not coming to work, I'm mad at Pam Bondi, that's not the way to do it. You go into the executive office with the president and say, listen, this is what I'm upset about. I need a couple of days off. Let's get our stories together. I know people don't want to hear that. They want transparency or whatever. But I just thought that if it is true, and maybe you know more than me, that's not, and you would know from being an officer in the United States military and from working and you're working in corporate organizations, there's certain ways if you're upset about something to handle them. And I thought at his position, I was like, wait, maybe he's kind of exposing his lack of, experience and maturity doing certain things. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, that was why I thought that the whole thing was nonsense, because I do know his background. I understand him and his role in the police force. I understand his role as a Secret Service agent. This is the guy who has been in positions where discretion is paramount. And he understands how the chain of command works. And I've heard his podcast. I get his personality. It seemed incredibly unlikely that a man like that would use a third-party cutout to go to Axios, of all people, to say, this is how dissatisfied I am with my boss.
Yeah.
That just dive in any way with the character of the man that I believe that he has and that he's shown in the past. And that was the primary reason why I called BS on this whole thing the minute I heard it.
Okay, that's and I like to tell people, because we all trying to beat each other up. There's a lot of ways to look at things, especially like you said earlier, when we don't have the information. So we can debate each other, argue with each other, but we don't have to buy into, each other's arguments. Sometimes we can give our argument, sit back, and let it happen. But I want to move off Epstein, and I'm going to bring us into a whole different area. But I think this will kind of frame it for the listeners, kind of how you got your worldview. So I'm gonna do it this way, Colonel. You were deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, and I'm sure that affected your worldview, your political view. And as an Army officer, I'm going to do an ABC. So, and how this, how your maybe your ideas or your views change. So, you're preparing to go to war. You land in a war zone, Afghanistan, Iraq, tough places to go. And on your way there, you're thinking about the world and the mission you're on. Then B, you get there. You're now an Army officer doing your job in a combat zone, and you're experiencing it. Like what is actually going on? I was getting ready to come. Now I'm here. And then C, you're now back home. And maybe not the first few months, but over the next few years, in those three stages, how did you look at the world?
Okay, well, during I was all-American GI Joe, and I still have tremendous faith in the United States of America. I took my oath to the Constitution very seriously, and I'm someone who you would find vocally defending the United States, even when sometimes maybe I shouldn't have been. Mm-hmm. And so, but that's just the passion that I had for wearing that American flag patch on my shoulder. And most of the things that I did in my career, I can honestly sit there and say, we're doing good. We make a difference. This is right. I come from a military family. My father was in World War II. My oldest brother was in Vietnam. I'm much younger than him. And I have that connection to the military, and all of my aunts and uncles, all my uncles did. Yep. And growing up as a kid, all the men on the street were either World War II veterans or Korean War veterans. And it was just who I was. And so I was really proud to get commissioned as an officer in the Army and I carried that with me. And I still had that when I went to Afghanistan. I went as a battalion commander, commanded what was called the Forward Support Battalion at the time, supporting a brigade of the 82nd Airborne Division. And that means food, fuel, bullets, transportation, medical care, just the full range of things that you need to keep an infantry brigade moving.
Yep.
And I've told the story I'm about to tell here a few times, but one of our signature missions was that we would do what was called humanitarian medical assistance missions. And we would do this in connection with the civil affairs guys. And they would be like, okay, we want to see what's going on in this village. We want to get connected with the village elders. Let's go out. And you guys provide this humanitarian medical care while we're talking to the village elders. And we did this like every week. And we would provide basic medical care, inoculations. There wasn't a lot we could do, but we had some specialists. We had optometrists who would make glasses for Afghani kids. We even had a veterinarian who would he was there for the working dogs, but he'd be checking out the donkeys.
Wow.
It was such a feel-good mission where you really felt like you were making a difference.
Yeah.
And that was usually one of my company commanders ran that mission. We had security elements from the infantry with us. But occasionally, I wanted to get outside the wire, so I would always go out when I could. And on one particular mission, I brought my intelligence officer, S2, was a female lieutenant. She was about 6 feet tall, very attractive young lady, very striking to the Afghans because all the Afghan women are covered up. And she's got her full battle rattle on, Kevlar body armor. And while we're out in this village, I see her talking to these two burqa-clad women, covered head to toe, and they're talking to her through an interpreter. And I wonder what's going on. And so I wait a few minutes, and they're gone. And I see my lieutenant over in the corner crying with her helmet off. And I'm like, what happened? So I walk over to her. I say, LT, what happened? And she said to me, sir, those two women, they wanted to know if I could buy them from their husband and take them back to America with me.
Wow.
Now, I mean, this was what goes on in that country, I knew. But that particular moment just hit me like a ton of bricks, because here I am thinking, we're out here trying to bring democracy to this place that has slavery.
Yeah.
They have slavery.
Yeah.
What are we thinking? What are we trying to do here? And it was very much of a the mask came off moment for me. I still love our country.
Right.
I still believe in our military. I think it's the greatest finest military in the world. I think our Constitution is as close to perfect as it can get. But I think that we sometimes try to do more than we should be doing.
Yeah.
And so that really changed my view. And so after I got done in Afghanistan, I left battalion command, but I immediately was brought on division staff in the 82nd and deployed to Iraq right outside Fallujah when Fallujah was really bad.
Yeah.
And that was, and actually, honestly, I felt pretty good about the Iraq mission because the Iraqi people were so oppressed. And I can just tell you so many stories of bad things that happened to them. And we were making a difference. We were restoring dignity to a society that had long had it. Now, there's a lot wrong with Iraqi society, but it was shocking to me once we established a base and we finally had CNN on where we could see it to see how things were getting reported. And they were so far removed from what I was experiencing on the ground. I mean, the bad things that were getting reported were true, but none of the good things were getting reported. And so I left Iraq, came back, and I went to one of the war colleges in Washington, D.C., where I was immersed in what seemed like almost daily protests against the war. And those protests were founded in just ignorance and ideas of what was happening, what wasn't happening. And it broke my heart, because to me, let me backtrack for a second. It broke my heart because I knew that the strategic goal of the folks we were fighting in Iraq was to break the American will. That was what they were trying to do. They knew they couldn't beat us on the battlefield,
right,
but they could by forcing America to withdraw. And they learned that lesson from Vietnam. Osama bin Laden learned that lesson in Somalia. And so when I came home, and the protests I was seeing, to me, felt like they were actively seeking to undermine the folks that they sent down range. If you vote to send me to war, you damn well better support me when I'm trying to fight that war.
Right.
That broke my heart.
Yeah.
That caused me to realize how much the military is simply a pawn in the politics of modern America. if you could send people off to fight and die and then turn around and decide, nope, I'm not going to do that anymore because it's politically expedient and I want to get John Kerry elected, that's filthy. That's foul. It's disgusting.
Yeah, allegedly, like what you're talking, and I'm gonna ask you a question after this. But I actually, soon in that war, when it started going a little bit bad, like meaning where you make advancements, you lose a little, like there's good and bad stuff going on. Allegedly, Ted Kennedy organized the U.S. Senate and the Democratic Congress people to say, if we want power, we weaponize this Iraqi war every day against the guys on the other side of the table, and that was the Republicans. That's a story I remember hearing. But what I'm hearing from you, what do you think that was it was winnable? But I guess everything's winnable, but at what cost?
Okay, so I'll give it to you different ways in two different countries. Afghanistan, to achieve the goals that we wanted to achieve of creating this sort of near liberal democracy, we would have needed to have occupation forces there for at least 100 years.
Yeah.
Afghanistan is the Old Testament with AK-47s and Hilux pickups.
Yep. It's
a tribal society. It bears no resemblance to anything that we respect in the United States. So if we were going to truly transform it, that's what it would have taken.
Yeah.
Knowing that the American people would never support that, the right answer was find bin Laden, take out the Taliban, kill bin Laden, kill his lieutenant, set up an air base with U.S. Air Force capabilities and ground special operations forces capabilities. So if another Al-Qaeda type training camp sets up, you can go out and do a surgical strike and then move back. And that would have been a strategy that would have worked. But our desire to go out and create this Afghan national army that ended up actually coming after us, the idea that we could sort of transform this society was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Iraq, on the other hand, in my opinion, Iraq's the cradle of civilization. And although it has so many of the problems that you see in the Islamic world, women are still mistreated. To me, it was more of an educated society that had been oppressed by a fascist dictator.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you another war story. So when we occupied our place in Iraq, it was on the banks of something called Lake Habbaniyah. Actually, what was my memories are dating me. Hold on a second. Let me just can we just pause for a second? I want to start this over. I want to Google.
Yeah.
Just try to give you the name correctly. Hold on. Yeah, Lake Habbaniyah. Okay, so when we occupied our location, it was on this airfield that was on the side of this place called Lake Habbaniyah, which if you look at a map west of Baghdad, you can see this giant lake that's there. And when we occupied it, there was this village that was abandoned, had obviously been abandoned for 25, 30 years. After we secured the area, the village was right outside our wire and was on the banks of the lake. And we started seeing people moving back in there. And so finally we put together a patrol with some interpreters and civil affairs folks. We went down there and we talked to the village leaders, and they were so happy to see us profusely. And they were telling us, our families fished here for thousands of years. This is our village. Saddam's sons built a palace on the other side of the lake, declared that all the fish was theirs. And if anyone tried to go and fish, they would get killed. And there had been men in this village who had gone out fishing who had been machine gunned to death by Saddam's kids' henchmen.
Yeah.
That's the kind of oppression that country was facing.
Yeah.
And so when you give them back their village, when you can say you can fish here, you can sell your fish, you're moving in a path that is achievable. It was a long way to go. We needed to stay in Iraq longer than we did to really succeed. And there's been a lot of blood. But I actually feel like Iraq was winnable.
Okay.
Which is why when we walked away so suddenly, it broke my heart again. Like, why did we spend this blood and treasure if we weren't going to follow through on it? Now, the fact is, in hindsight, 10 years later after the withdrawal, Iraq is not a threat at the moment. So I think that that's a good thing. That's a positive thing. And I really pray that those folks there can live normal, happy lives, because, as much as I despise a lot of the principles you see in Islamic culture, these were generally decent, good people, not the ones we were fighting, but the ones who were trying to help us.
Right. So that, because, it's tough, and in the sense I didn't have a now and looking back or whatever. I look at George Bush not as a bad person, but just as a person that didn't have kind of the instincts or the upbringing to kind of make good decisions. Like what you were saying about the American culture, like it wasn't 1940, it wasn't 1950. Today's culture is different than the 1960s. That I think that has to be put into the formula when we decide to go to war. And I kind of feel like Trump has had the opportunity to learn from that, and he's kind of put that into his doctrine on war. Like he has, because, well, obviously, once you see something, you see the man who went down the path before you, you can adjust it. I actually think Trump has adjusted for America is no longer united. We're past that. Our government's too big. People really think differently today. Even people that you're close with and friends, I can't even believe how half of them think how our country should be run. But I think Trump has now built that into his own doctrine by looking at what we've done in the past. What do you think about that?
I completely agree, 100%. And I say that this isn't an insult, it's just a statement of fact. Where America is right now, we lack the national will to engage in any kind of war that is not a matter of national survival. We lack it. We've shown this. Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia. We lack the national will to do anything that isn't going to be over immediately. That's why Desert Storm was so popular. We were in, we were out.
Yeah.
We cannot engage in any sort of extended military conflict, nor should we, unless it's a matter of national survival, because the people of America, and I know there are people who say, oh, I would support it. The majority of people in America will not support it. So we shouldn't waste our blood and treasure. We can't send our young men and women off to die in efforts that we're not going to follow through on.
Yeah. And you mentioned, and I read a post, or I read it maybe in the Federalist.com. You can find Cynical Publius articles there. But you said there's now a gulf between civilians and veterans. Give a little background on that.
Yeah, what I go back to was my experience growing up in New Jersey, like you, in the 60s, 70s. And we had a little neighborhood, but everyone was real close. And every dad in that neighborhood, every last one of them, was either a World War II vet or a Korean War vet.
Yep.
When there were matters of importance that were happening, everything went through that prism. And they all understood it. It was a common understanding. It wasn't just some senator who had been a veteran. It was the guy who pumped your gas was a veteran. It was your doctor was a veteran. Everyone had a similar context as to what war meant, what the cost of war meant, and how we should be engaging our armed forces. And, we had the draft in Vietnam. We ended it. We had the all-volunteer force. The all-volunteer force has been a tremendous success, but it's created a cadre of veterans that are not reflective of the rest of America once they become veterans. There's a disconnect. There's people who just don't understand what it means to be in the military. And it's even worse because we relied so heavily on our volunteers. There are guys who spent 10, 15 years of their lives at war, and they are disconnected from the people in America who have not been, who don't understand it. Now, a lot of families understand it. Families of veterans get it, but it's also geographically an isolation issue. You can walk into a town, maybe let's say in Tennessee, and you're going to find a whole lot of veterans. But when I went to go work in Silicon Valley as a lawyer, I was like a hothouse flower. I was a rarity.
Right.
I was like the only veteran any of them had ever met.
Yeah.
It was absolutely insane. And people would ask me all sorts of bizarre questions, just inappropriate stuff. Did you ever kill anyone? I mean, that whole society was disconnected from where I came from. I felt like an alien on another planet. And so I don't know that that's healthy for America. If we're going to be the world's superpower and we're going to be deploying forces all over the world, Americans need to understand what that means, and I don't think a lot of them do.
I'll give you a perfect example of that, just the historical, whatever war we've been in, the richest people are not going to be fighting that war. But in World War II, Guggenheim, one of the richest guys in America, and Lindbergh, even though Lindbergh was against the, fighting the Germans in the beginning or whatever, Guggenheim is so wealthy. Lindbergh is old, and these are older guys now. They fly combat missions. They get special dispensation from the United States Air Force because they're both plane crazy guys. They love planes. They actually flew missions attacking enemy targets of Japan. I found that fascinating. Or Jimmy Stewart. Yeah, Jimmy Stewart, a perfect example. Give the audience what you know about Jimmy Stewart after being this giant Hollywood star.
Well, I forget exactly, but I do know that he went to go be, I can't remember if it was a B-17 or B-24 pilot. I don't remember all the particulars, but he went to go be a pilot, to fly planes in combat. He wasn't going to do any special Hollywood gladiating stuff. He was putting himself at risk in probably one of the most dangerous occupations of the war because he was a patriot.
He was in World War II, and he bombed North Vietnam as a pilot. And this is after he was so well known as an actor. So this cultural thing about us going in and fighting these big wars, we just don't have it. But like you said, if it was survival, yeah, obviously. But everyone's going to fight for survival. But for us to lead the world, it's you can't count. I don't know if you can count on that. You just can't count on certain people for that. There's no doubt. And go ahead, Colonel.
Can I say this? Any war, you're going to be fighting against a thinking enemy. And that thinking enemy, even if they're a bunch of 8th century savages with AK-47s, they will find ways to kill your people. They will find ways to make the war a war. And American people right now will not tolerate extended loss of life of their troops. They will not.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, that means you cannot fight a war to its completion. If you can't fight a war to its completion, you shouldn't fight it in the first place at all. That's my position.
No, that's a good position to have. And I'm gonna throw another big topic that you've covered before that kind of leads right in from what we're talking about is the U.S. military now kind of resenting that they are under the command of civilians. And I always that's something new, right? I'd like you to kind of share your insight on that.
Well, I mean, I don't want to generalize about the entire United States military.
Yeah.
But I where you're seeing this is in the effort of, and it's not just the military, it's the federal bureaucracy more broadly.
Yeah.
Where the efforts of Donald Trump and Secretary Hegseth to sort of transform some things. And my theory as to what happened was that, when you're a military officer, you have got the sort of a core ethos. Here are the things that matter. Here is why I do what I do. And those core ethos for me were things like defending the Constitution, ensuring liberty, making sure the world is a place where freedom is possible, all of those sorts of idealistic things that drive a young man like I was at the time to raise his right hand. But what somewhere along the way, concepts like DEI became core competencies, became core ethos, and we promoted rank after rank over the last 20, 30 years of people for whom that ethos of DEI, of diversity and inclusion trumps everything else, became their core ethos for why they served. And so to me, that's losing sight of your mission. But when Trump and Hegseth comes in and says things like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Admiral, you're not getting promoted because you had a drag show on your aircraft carrier," they see that as an attack on their core ethos. Just as when I was serving, I would have seen an attack on the Constitution as an attack on my core ethos. That idea that diversity is our strength, that we competency is secondary to diversity, that became ingrained. And so as Donald Trump and Secretary Hegseth and the service secretaries come in and try and unwind that. To a lot of the senior leaders, it's like the civilians are saying, abandon your oath, abandon who you are. That's how far it's gone in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So when we talk about military leadership sort of balking at civilian leadership, that's what's going on. That's why you saw so many of the reliefs that you saw early on. And you know what? It's just so wrong, because I remember I was serving when Clinton took over, and I was so opposed to so many things about that man, but he was my commander in chief.
Yeah.
And I took an oath, and I needed to follow lawful orders. Somehow that at certain levels, it got lost.
And that culture has moved in with the FBI and some of and we've seen with the intelligence agencies. We don't care you elect a guy.
And in the EPA and the Department of Education, all of it. And to me, the thing is when you are, quote unquote, resisting the policies of a lawfully elected president, you are resisting the Constitution and the American electorate. Don't kid yourself that you're somehow a good guy. You're the bad guy.
Yeah. It's we're coming up on the hour, but there's one final topic I want to cover with you, and you just rattled off so many bullet points on this, and that was Democrats. And believe me, they're in the wilderness. To me, they got nothing going on. Blocking street traffic and no kings, that ain't helping. They have no message. They don't have any. It doesn't look like they have any talent. But one thing they still believe, they're like the high school football team from 20 years ago that went 12-0, and they still think they have a great program. But they're always claiming they're on the right side of the history. And you did a wonderful takedown of how they weren't on the right side of the history. And if you could just cite a few of those, I would appreciate it.
Well, if you want to see all of them, if you're a listener out there, go to my X site. And I have a long post on this. It's at the very top of my Twitter feed because I think it's really important. I think that the foundational aspects of the United States of America are these ideas of personal liberty that come from the Enlightenment. The idea that these rights that we have are inviolable, that they come from God. I mean, it says it in our founding documents, that they're pre-existent, that you can't take them away. And that's sort of exactly the opposite of how Democrats operate. This whole idea of, we have disinformation. We have to control information getting out there that's wrong. Well, that's called freedom of speech, folks. It's sort of our fundamental component to who we are.
Absolutely.
And Democratic Party, if you look at its history, you go back, it's never been on the right side of anything. It was on the side of slavery. It was on the side of Jim Crow. It was on the side of not granting women the voting franchise. It was on the side of Woodrow Wilson coming in and saying black sailors could no longer fight as sailors. They had to be stewards. You could no longer be in the federal service if you were black. It was on the side of going against the Civil Rights Act in the 1960s. They've always been on the wrong side of history. They like to pretend they're on the right side, but you look at who they were and what they are. Now, they'll tell you this nonsense that the party's magically flipped at some point.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is that the Democrats have always strived on creating divisions in society. It's a Marxist concept. It started doing it with class, but now they've decided that it's very important to break society in whatever lines they can. As the Obama administration came in, all of the cures for racism we were working on got unwound.
Yep.
And racism became their friend. Racism's good because it sets people against each other and it gives us power. So choosing racism as your means of advancing a political view is the wrong side of history. I could go on and on, Tom. I recommend folks look at the top post of my X account. I go into a lot more detail there.
Yeah, I'd like to tell everyone that that's your pin post. So go to Cynical Publius. You can see it behind me on the camera, but on the screen. Colonel, it was great having you. We covered a lot, which was great, and I'd love to have you back. So great having you.
My pleasure. Anytime.
We'll see you soon, everyone. We'll talk later.
Disclaimer. The host assumes no responsibility or liability for any errors or omissions in the content of this podcast. The information contained in this podcast is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.